Well, it's mid-February now. Brought this thing home last summer for a winter project. It's moving slowly, but it's moving, so today we're going to do a little update on it. This tractor belonged to Raymond Evans and mowed hay down in Southern California on a 40-acre farm along the Eel River. As you can see, it was partially disassembled because the engine had become stuck. It had sat in a barn covered, but not a lot of protection from our northwest weather. The carburetor was in an unbelievable state of disrepair, and it took me 2 months just to get it apart. First thing I had to do was get it out of the weather, so we went down to Costco and bought a shop extension for the west end of the house. With it safely under cover, I began to remove all the little bugs that had decided every orifice in this engine needed to be a nesting place for them. Mud daubers found their way into the cylinders by way of a couple of missing spark plugs. Paper wasps like the tubes for the radiator, good place to build a nest, and mason bees filled every other hole, including the oil dipstick, with mud and baby bees. I borrowed Randy's engine stand and made an adapter to hold the little LA block on the John Deere engine. The stuck engine was a rod bearing cap that had seized on number 1. A trip down to Chehalis to Larry Schwartz's house, and I was able to get new pistons and bearings all set, even an extra crankshaft to put this thing back together. So we went through it, and just last week I towed it out to the barn annex and put the engine in. In the first video, I showed you how to repair a busted rim. I've got all that done now and back from powder coating, and it looks pretty good. I work on tractors because I'm not a body and fender man, and I just don't have that touch. I hate those guys that can take that bent metal and make it look like it just came from the factory. I got to hammer on it and think about it and start over many times. I spent about 40 hours once replacing a 1949 Ford F2 cab corner behind the driver's door. I got the patch panel professionally made and cut it out and welded it all in, and I wanted my body man friend to come over and finish it for me. And when he got there, he looked at it for a minute and said, "Well, that's all got to come out." If the ladies can't find you handsome, at least let them find you handy. I got the new wheels installed, tubes, tires, rims all cleaned up, and the hubcap returned to the proper color, John Deere green. I'm going to bolt that back on now, making progress. If you mount your own tires, this is what you need. Gets those beads slicked over there, and these tools help seat the new tire on the rim. Be careful not to pinch the inner tube or you'll poke a hole in it. Here's a good reason to dry fit stuff that you've never worked on before. It looks like at some point the radiator mounts got out of alignment with the engine water connectors. So I'm going to have to figure out what happened here. I think I know. This side down here, the light mount is broken off. You can see the one over here that isn't broken off. It goes through the cowling, and the light, the bug eye light, comes out here. I think they broke this off, and it looks like they made this piece here. So I'm going to have to cut these off. Both sides. Get the height and the positioning set correctly for the top and the bottom, because this has to come through the cowling, and the cowling can't touch the radiator. This is a pretty precision fit up here. The fan goes in here, so you don't want interference with that. So looks like I'm stuck again. Not for long. You guys can't hear that unless you pay for it. Here's where the light goes on this side. Something like this. I guess it goes this way. I'll have to look at the book. And the one on this side has been broken off. So I'm going to cut these here and here. Put the radiator on with the hoses connected, lower and upper, and then that'll kind of center it up for me. And then I'll adjust shims under here before I tack in the new mounts. Find number 1 piston on the John Deere engine. It's the front one, number 1, and the back one is number 2. I take number 2 out so that when I come up on the compression stroke, the only cylinder that'll have compression is number 1, and I'm going to time everything to number 1. Bottom line is you need to be on the compression stroke for number 1 cylinder. Number 1, number 2. Loosen the cover on the access port to the flywheel and swing the lid out of the way. If the engine was a Hercules, the flywheel housing would be bolted to the block, but as you can see here, it's an integral casting part of the John Deere block. There are 2 marks on the flywheel. One says spark and the other says DC. You want to be on the spark marking and have it right in the center of the opening. Remove the rotor cap from the mag, set it aside. Okay, timing it. Once you've got the cover off, the mag rotates counterclockwise, and right there is the impulse pawl engaging if you rotate it counterclockwise. And you want this rotor to be right here approximately for the spark to occur on number 1 at top dead center. So to get that and mesh the gears, turn it clockwise till the 8 o'clock position. And that's just before the impulse. If you go a little further and come back, you can see I'm against the impulse again. But if you set it right here, then you have a little slop to play with the gears when you're meshing it. I use a Irvin clamp, soft jawed, to hold this in place while I put the bolts on. The outside lead goes to number 1, and you know that because you set the rotor at 830, remember?